western France. I'm here on the Sèvres-Niortaise River, which is in the heart of the Marais Poitevin, or the Poitou Marsh, one of France's largest wetland areas, the second largest in fact after the Camargue. It extends over about 1,000 kilometres from the city of Niort towards the Atlantic. And there are two main parts to the marsh. There's the western part nearer the coast, which is known as the dry marsh, which has been heavily drained and is largely used for agriculture. And we're here in the eastern part, known as the wet marsh, which is full of a network of over 1,000 kilometres of canals, and it's very popular with tourists. And it's also known as the Green Venice because of all the canals. So we're going to now head into one of the canals and have a look at some of the sights and the natural wonders that we can find alongside them. So here we are heading into a canal that's right next to our house, and this is one of many canals which were originally built, or they started to be built, in the 12th century by monks who built abbeys around the river basin. I should explain that between 10,000 and 1,000 years ago, all of this land was underwater. It was under the sea, and gradually the river basins silted up and the abbeys were built around the edge, and the monks started to drain the land and reclaim it for cultivation. And this process was continued over the centuries. A lot of work was done in the time of Napoleon on construction of the canals, and until well into the 20th century, the canals and the river were the main means of transport. People transported everything around this area on boats. There were no roads, so everything went on the boats: crops, wood, cattle, everything you can think of. And you can probably see that alongside the canal banks there are lots of lovely old pollarded trees. These are ash trees, and they were planted very, very widely along the canal banks many years ago, centuries ago in some cases. They're very good for protecting the structure of the bank, and they're also excellent for firewood. As you can imagine, there's a lot of anxiety about what's going to happen to these trees with the ash dieback disease, which is sweeping across Europe, and there's a lot of discussion about what species should be planted to replace them. Over this side of the canal, you can see that there's a plantation of poplar, and the poplar are planted as a very fast-growing species. That's one of the main economic activities of the area, is growing poplar wood. It's probably the main activity after tourism. There are lots of wonderful emblematic species that live in the Marais. Herons, kingfisher, dragonflies, many birds of prey, even the European otter. There are also a number of invasive species which have rather taken over, in particular the coipu, which is a South American mammal, sort of something between a beaver and a giant rat. And they are very popular with the tourists. You often see them swimming in the canals, but they're considered a great nuisance by the farmers because they do a lot of damage to crops and banks. And of course they've got no natural predators in this part of the world. Their natural predator in South America would be the alligator, It has been suggested once or twice that alligators should be introduced into the canals to get rid of them, but fortunately so far that suggestion has been resisted.